Okay, 7.6, humanistic trait and social cognitive theories. Again, you are going to compare and contrast these to one another and the psychodynamic theory. So students will be able to compare and contrast all theories on personality. Now remember, back to our schools of thought, we have humanistic is going to be that everyone has some good and living to your fullest potential. And social cognitive is going to be your society. And cognitive is the way that you process information. Trait's going to be new, so we're going to talk about that in a moment. So the humanistic theories. Abraham Maslow was self-actualization. Remember, he had his hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization is here at the top. He said, what drives your personality is self-actualization. Living up to your fullest potential. All right, moving on. Carl Rogers believed in what we call the person-centered perspective or client-centered therapy, really. And this is how he would determine your personality. He said your personality is focused on three things: how genuine you are, how willing you are to accept others, your unconditioned positive regard, and empathy. So this is what makes up your personality. And there was this focus for humanistics in general for this self-concept, who am I, trying to determine that for a person. Now, there are some critics of all of these theories of the humanistic theory. The critics would say that this theory is very subjective and focuses on the self, which can lead to selfishness. So the overall view of humanistic is to look for consistent trends. Because we all know that we can have specific behaviors that can be impacted by a lot of factors. So you may have a bad day. So overall, though, consistently, who are you? Okay, so trait theories. These are when we explore individual traits that make your personality. Okay, but this theory tends to be the most tested, so therefore the most applicable to today. So the first is exploring personality traits, and this is based off the factor analysis, so it's on a scale, really. between Hans and Sybil Eisnick. And there's two parts to the scale. The first is extroversion versus introversion. So do you get your energy from those outside of you, or do you get your energy from those inside, or like by your own self? And then the second part of it is the emotional stability versus instability. And so essentially, just to give you an example of the 4 different types of this, right? So if you are introvert and unstable, then you tend to be moody. If you are unstable and an extrovert, then you might be impulsive. If you are extrovert, let's say extra. Or no, it's extra. Sorry, extra. If you are extrovert and stable, you are probably a really good leader. And if you are stable and introvert, then you might be very reliable. And again, this is a spectrum, so I'm just giving you the extremes on each end of those, but this just kind of gives you an idea of how they explore your different personality traits and combine those together to determine your personality. So how do we do that? So how do we figure out what your traits are? Well, that's what we call a personality inventory. It's a questionnaire designed to gauge a range of feelings and behaviors. The most common is the Minnesota Multifacet Personality Inventory, and it is the most widely researched and clinically used. So now for most people, if they are going to take a personality test, it is going to be the MMPI. And it is usually given by doctors, right? Because they are the ones that are going to analyze that data. And this is what we call empirically derived, which means that it has been tested. And what they do is then they can determine which questions to give to which diagnosis, which questions to give to which diagnostic group. So depending on which personality disorder they think you may have, depends on which test they may give you. Not every person takes the same personality test because this has been empirically derived, meaning there's been a lot of research behind it. And if we're trying to determine certain disorders, there's no need to take the exact same test. Okay, so another personality theory is the Big 5 personality theory. And these are the traits that you have underneath this theory. And the idea being that based on your test scores, you're either going to have a low score or a high score in each one of these 5 areas. Ocean is the best mnemonic device to remember these by. The first being openness. How open are you to new ideas? And you're going to fall on either end of the spectrum. Either you're very conventional, you like your routine, or you will do anything. You will try anything new. How conscientious you are, meaning how thoughtful are you, goal-driven. Either you're very impulsive and disorganized if you score low, or if you score high, you're very hardworking and dependable. E is going to be extroversion. How outgoing are you? Are you very quiet, reserved and withdrawn, or are you very outgoing, warm, and seek adventure? Agreeableness, cooperative, trustworthy, and good-natured. If you score low, you're very critical and uncooperative. You don't work well with others. If you score high, you are very helpful, trusting, and empathetic. And then the last one is neuroticism. If you score very low on this, that's actually a good thing. So this is kind of the oddball out here. You are calm, even-tempered. If you score very high, you tend to be very anxious and unhappy. Now, what we do know about these Big 5 is they are stable in adulthood. So if you were to take this as a kid or even as a teenager, it may not be as stable as it is if you took it in your late 20s or early 30s. How heritable is it? Well, we know that this is about a 50% inherited from your parents. So if you have a parent who scores very high in a lot of these categories, and you have a 50% chance that you will score very high in these categories, which actually sounds like, well, it's 50-50, you can just flip a coin, but really it's more, this does show that there is some inherited traits that you get from your parents. Now, whether that's because you got it from your parents or because you were raised by your parents is still more studies need to be done. How predictable is this? It's actually very accurate. So it's very predictable. Because people aren't going to lie about these kinds of things. They're not types of questions that people tend to lie about. People are pretty honest about whether or not you like to spend time with others or do you like to spend time by yourself. So the questions themselves are normally answered very truthfully. Social cognitive theory is from Bandura, right? Bandura, just to remind you, is the Bobo doll. So observational learning. I think that will help make sense in this theory as well. But he would say that your personality is made up of your personal factors, so what you believe personally, your environmental factors, right? We know that he believes that you are very much a product of your environment. So what type of reinforcement you get, what kind of feedback do you get from others? And then finally, behavior, which is actions, choices, statements, learning, and achievements. So he would say that these three things all are combined to make your personality the way it is. And these are just a list of terms that you should be familiar with from this chapter. A couple of things that I want to hit on. So we have the spotlight effect, overestimating others, noticing and evaluating our appearance, performance, and blunders. This is increased with social media. People are not going to notice your errors as much as you think they are going to. Very important. Self-esteem versus self-worth and self-efficacy. So self-esteem is your personal feeling of self-worth. So how you feel about yourself. Self-efficacy is going to be your sense of competence. So how competent do you think you are? Self-serving bias. So we have bias as the key word here. Our readiness to perceive ourselves favorably. So we tend to look at ourselves in a better light. Narcissism is excessive. This is the key word, excessive self-love and self-absorption. I'm sure you can maybe think of some figures in today's society that may tend to have an excessive amount of self-love and an excessive amount of self-absorption. I'm sure you all can figure out who that may be. Individualism is the priority to your own goals. So if you have a couple things to do, but one of them is your own personal goal, you're probably going to give that priority over other things that need to be done. The exact opposite of that would be collectivism, where you give priority to the group versus yourself. And those can be interchangeable. So these are, again, just some terms that you want to be familiar with and you want to know for this chapter.